Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. I'm Jeff, and I'm joined as always by my good buddies Richard
Hello.
and Michael.
Howdy.
Joined makes it sound like they aren't integral components, the foundation of this podcast, which is what they are. But in fact, they come up with all the great ideas for it. And this week's episode is about the Mount Rushmore of Comfort TV, which Richard chose.
Yes,
Why?
I did.
Yeah.
Just because my wife and I were watching some shows coming up recently that were sort of like a warm security blanket.
Yeah. Like the McNeil
And
Report or something.
yeah, it was exactly. And and specifically, I know that we were watching, started watching Blackadder again, which is not on my list,
That's my jam.
but could have been on my list. And we actually started showing it to our son, who's 10. And he thought it was really funny, and it was just sort of like great to kind of have this show that I feel very just makes me feel very warm and comforted, even though it's not a very warm and comforting show necessarily, but I feel very calmed and pleased by any time I watch it. It's something that I can go back to over and over again, and that's really what a comfort show is. It's the type of show that no matter what type of mood you're in, you can put it in and instantly be taken into a better place, no matter how many times you've watched it. So that's kind of what the genesis behind the episode is.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to kind of dissecting what makes something a comfort to you as we go along. So, Michael, you start.
My first choice, I think, might not be a surprise to many. It is a British show. It's a great show. It is, of course, Ground Force, the 1990s, a British gardening show, which I just adored watching on BBC America back in the 2000s. And they have a number of episodes on YouTube that you can find very hard to find otherwise. Now, Ground Force is a series where there's a host named Alan Titchmarsh, and he has like these 2 to 3 other assistants with him, Charlie Dimmock and Tommy Walsh. And what they do is they go into like this it's very typical, very small, often British backyard, a little garden, and it's in some sort of disarray. And Alan has this very calming English, gentle voice, but very funny. And they go in and they have over the weekend, it's kind of like a surprise show. They have a weekend to go in, demolish it, turn it around before someone comes back from some sort of like little mini vacation or stay or business trip or whatever. So they've worked it out with their husband or wife or brother, sister or something or whatever it is. And they send this person away. And they have no idea what's going on. And, they kind of have a hidden camera crew. And then through this entire thing, they are transforming a backyard into this lovely little peaceful garden. And there's just like this wonderful music that plays. It's so soft and so gentle. And then usually at the end, they have like a little glass of champagne and they welcome out and they're so surprised. And it's so lovely. There's nothing, there's little confrontations within trying to do something speedily, but the person that's surprised is so overwhelmed with joy. It is it's just like a nice transformative show, and it's usually set within the lovely English countryside. And it was one of these shows that I introduced to Emily during kind of COVID and lockdown, and it became something where it was like, all right, the kid's in bed, we can put something on that is warm and cozy and shows a world that doesn't exist for us or hasn't existed in a long time, just like this outdoorsy, lush, green English garden that's just utterly fucking charming. And it's just one of those things that's like, I wish I could have access to more of them now, but I'm kind of just limited by technology.
Is it a competition per se, or
No.
Or it's like
It
okay,
is
it's like extreme makeover, like a
yes, but
home, like okay,
without like all that superfluous like extremeness of it.
yeah,
Like they take something that's kind of a bunch of rubble or like just overgrown, and it's very community based, and they have to go and at the end they got to hide the big lorry and they got to go get everything hide around the corner, and then the person comes out and they're just surprised, and like there's never a moment where the person comes home and they're not totally pleased to see this lovely
Mhm.
host, Alan. They're not totally pleased to see all, the transformation. It's not like, oh, you did that to this. It's always like,
Mhm.
"Ah, so bless you. Oh my God, so
Mhm.
happy. All and it's just like, it's heartwarming and it's so comforting. And I think that especially during COVID, when we were locked up so much, to watch something like that, one just reminded me of, like, 20 years ago watching the show, but then also just to just feels good. Feels
Yeah.
good.
So it's a kind of it's like a marriage between the nostalgia of going back to a time when you saw it and maybe life was a little bit simpler, but also the subject matter is very calming
Oh,
and
yes, for
restorative
sure.
and
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Restorative. What a good word.
I wonder if they were like, "My weed plants, you tore them up? That was gonna be my life savings." Oh, man.
My
Wow.
prize, crabgrass. I don't know why this. I don't know why this person from, like, Texarkana is somehow in
This is
Wales. It's,
my
it's
prize.
along the English coast.
Is it do you think this is a progenitor of, like, a Great British Bake Off or something like that? Even though I guess those are competitive type of shows.
I think that there is definitely a relation there, at least in tone. There's a I don't know if it's one of Richard's picks. It might be. I definitely considered it for mine because there is a supportiveness of Great British Bake Off that doesn't
Mhm.
exist in other shows. But at the end of the day, it's not like someone is being kicked off and being
Yeah.
well wished away by
Yeah.
you know uh, some guy from the Mighty Boosh. It's like
Mhm.
uh, the and even at the end of, as we all know, at the end of Great British Bake Off, they're all invited back and they have this lovely garden party and all this stuff. But
Yeah.
it doesn't have that. There's no cutthroatedness behind Great British Bake Off. It's still
Mhm.
lovely,
Mhm.
but it's totally different vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, and I'm curious as we go through all these things, like you before we got on the mic, Mike was talking about introducing his young son to some old films in honor of the upcoming spooky season day Halloween. And even though those may not be calming films and that they were like scary films, they're still nostalgic, right? They're still it's kind of very there's something comforting about that old black and white
Oh yeah.
stuff. So yeah, cool. Richard, what's your first?
Well, you guys talked about it. I don't know if I have much
Oh,
left to say about it, but it is the Great British Bake Off.
oh, fun. Okay,
Especially the early years when Mary Berry was on the show.
Mm.
okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with Prue. Prue is a perfectly fine judge, and I have nothing but good feelings towards her. But the original years, the first few seasons, when it was Mary Berry and a young, innocent Paul Hollywood before he went Hollywood, and when the judges or the hosts were Sue Perkins and Mel Geidrick. Again, nothing wrong with having Matt Lucas or Noel Fielding or anybody else, Sandy or anyone else as the presenters. But there was just something about that initial group of presenters and judges that just had this incredible chemistry that worked. And as Michael said, there is something just charming about this competition show where there's nothing cutthroat about the competition at all. Like
Yeah.
you don't see anybody like pouring salt into somebody's, cake batter behind their back or anything like that. Everyone is there to help support everyone else. And if somebody is struggling, someone else who has some free time will come over and help them work on something. And it really is delightful. It's just something that you don't see in American competition shows. And I mean, it is literally comfort TV of the most literal order because you look at those, they are making comfort food in a
Mm,
very, very
yeah.
literal sort of way. Um, my wife bakes baking. I do cook. I don't bake. I'm not much of a baker. I did make the king cake for Mardi Gras
Oh.
that we had this year, and it actually turned out it's a very simple recipe. But boy, did I felt like one of the contestants in Great British Bake Off trying to make this real basic cake. like sitting there sweating it,
Uh,
looking at it in the oven. Okay, is it ready to come out? How do I know? Do I get the toothpick in there and pull it out? Do I go convection bake or regular bake? And you start to it's just funny with these sort of shows where after a while you start to feel like you s- even though you don't really know anything about baking and these people are expert bakers and just so much doing these things that are so complex that you will never be able to achieve it on any level. Can sit there and go, "Uh-oh, I don't think they proofed that correctly." So that starts to happen after a while.
mhm.
Um, there is not a companion show, but there is I appreciate that the Americanized version of this. There was an American baking show version of it, which I never watched. Did have Paula Hollywood in it, but I think the true American successor to this is Nailed It,
Oh, okay.
which is essentially the opposite, where they take really bad bakers and have them try to do really complex things and fail, and everyone just sort of laughs about it. Which just
That,
goes to show that's America for you right
yeah,
there.
it does feel like what the colonies have done since the end of the Revolutionary War. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Did we we meant to do a country and we goofed. Yeah. Yeah. We I think of baking as the most nostalgic thing. I think of my grandmother or when I was a kid, mom baking cookies or something like that. And so the fact that there's a TV show about it, oh my God, that's going to be comfort food for me no matter what. Didn't know Paul Hollywood had an affair with one of the co-hosts that ended up ending his marriage. Wow. Well, intrigue there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that like I said, lots of camaraderie on that set. It
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't with Mary Berry though,
No.
at
No.
least.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
We too are. I'll just put a little aside there. We too are a fan of Great British Bake Off. It is fun. A lot of it currently goes to Noel Fielding just being an absolute maniac and just
Hmm.
what a strange second half career choice sort of thing for him to be like seeing him like walking around in a watermelon shirt or something. This
Hmm.
oversized thing, just kind of like flirting with some people and just being a total weirdo.
Yeah.
But then I think, oh my god, just the entire British uh, TV landscape is filled with this sort of like there's just another world of like television comedic presenters that is like dominated by like him and Richard Iode. I think I pronounced his name right, and like
Oh
other
yeah.
people within like that kind of like not alternative
Hmm.
comedy spectrum, because I think that's just like the mainstream thing, but it's definitely like people that have either appeared on the IT the IT
mighty
crowd
crowd.
and
Hmm.
or Mighty Boosh and or I don't know. It's where like the young ones would have possibly been or probably were in like the mid 90s. Just this
Yeah.
very strange alternative crowd that became normal. But yeah, what a cast of characters that are just the people that are on the show too, who you're just either rooting for or rooting against, and
Hmm.
for no particular reason.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I don't feel like we have those people. I guess if you think of like Chris Hardwick was kind of like that, and he broke into like game shows for a while, but like
Mm.
yeah, we have like kind of seems older. Yeah, that's interesting.
We
Yeah,
just
I
don't. We
think
just don't. We
Who's
just
our
don't have. We just don't
who's our
have like
Wink
this.
Martindale? Who's our
Mm.
Wink Martindale
well, we
of
don't have
our
a lot of shows that are
generations?
about wordplay and cleverness. It seems like they're about
Yeah.
dancing. Like
Yeah, we got Jimmy Fallon, so that's we got hosed on this one.
You get people that gonna get pushed into the um, being a judge on a masked singer sort of thing,
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever it is. If you can land that spot where you can be on a TV show for,
Hmm.
I don't know, make innocent or I don't know,
Hmm.
digging quips, but I don't know. I don't watch any of that shit.
So what do you watch? What's your second one, Michael?
I am going to stay in the food world, and I'm
Oh,
going to stay with Alton Brown's Good Eats. Now,
oh,
Mm.
fun.
I really like the show. I've always liked it growing up as well. I think it also has a lot of my picks have this kind of nostalgia bent, because I think that's what comfort is. It's about something familiar. I think Richard and I can attest to. Man, do I love a good plate of buttered noodles, and that's it. Get out of here with all your
Yeah.
fancy sauces and
Yeah.
rich textures, and it's like you get some butter on some noodles, and I'm golden. But I think that Alton Brown exists in like this dual space for me, where like I like him on Good Eats. I'm not too much of a fan of his on like as being like kind of snarky know-it-all on uh, some of his other shows. Like he had like a kind of a competition show that he was the host of. I didn't care for that.
Hmm.
Like he's like the uh, what is it? What's the Iron Chef? He's kind of like the host of like the newish kind of Iron Chef. I'm kind of not of a fan of him there. But when he's in this
Hmm.
weird element where he's kind of like a Mr. Wizard sort of character, he's like this little mini filmmaker, sort of like his love of movies comes out, his love of food, his love of showing you how and why food tastes good and how to shop for things and what to look for and like kind of the little bits and pieces. Oh, there's nothing better for me than
Hmm.
that sort of like joking, silly, but also like he shows you how to make a pretty simple meal that you can kind of replicate and be like, I can do that. I can do that cocktail. And I think also for me and Emily personally, on our very first date, we had um, gone out to a restaurant, and we kind of somehow the topic of conversation came up to like food and cooking. And I don't know if she said, I make this incredible ham. And I said, I don't know. I make this really incredible ham. And it just so happened to be that we were both talking about the same like ham preparation from an Alton Brown episode. And
Oh
so
wow.
there's just, it's just that look up the City Ham uh, episode. And it's just like this. It's wonderful. And it's just one of those things where, uh, I don't know, that show just, it's 30 minutes or 22 minutes or whatever have you. And it starts off with a good eats sort of thing and goes into it, and you can get 2.5 good recipes and nonsense.
Hmm.
Just delicious, delicious looking, delicious tasting. Hopefully,
That's a lot of fun. What a fun little coincidence. That's an auspicious moment between you and Emily.
yeah, it was
To
very, it was very like, oh, right off the bat, holy, what
Mhm.
that seems impossible, but here
Yeah,
we go.
yeah, that's really cool. That's an interesting thing that I have discovered, where the frame is almost important as the painting inside. The the setup for Alton Brown, and that was matched him perfectly. But then you just felt like, nah, I don't. I just don't like him outside of that setting. It's always disappointing.
Right.
It is. It's 100. You're entirely right. There's
Yeah.
an element of like, I want you to live in this little box, even though that's not comfortable for you or good for you as a person. But for me,
Yeah.
stay right there.
Yeah. Paul McCartney's new techno album. Like,
Mm.
okay, right.
I'll pass. Thanks.
Yeah. Um, I, I, I'm sorry. I was thinking I heard the doorbell, but I guess I didn't. Okay. Okay. So, Richard, what's your second?
All right. My second choice is MythBusters,
Oh,
Oh,
super.
the Adam and Jamie joint, along with
yeah, yeah.
the myth busting crew.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just a type of show where you can just throw on any random episode
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and
Great. Yep.
just be thoroughly entertained. I think maybe some of the later episodes where they started running out of ideas, and it was like Hollywood special effects special number 27 got a little bit tedious. But the ones, especially the early ones, where they're doing things like will your cell phone make your car catch on fire if you have it out at a gas station?
Mm-hmm.
It's just fascinating stuff. And yes, there were always the big explosions. That was always a selling point of the show. And they had to make sure that they worked that, shoehorned that into the episodes one way or another. But for me, the actual builds themselves and the process that Adam and Jamie went through to try and actually bust these myths or prove that they're real, that was always as fascinating to me than the actual final reveal itself.
Hmm.
And and it's if you're someone with an inquisitive mind, as I'd like to think I have, it's I was never great at science, but I love the concept of science. So any sort of pop science type of show that it can explain science to me in real layman's terms and get me to understand more advanced science concepts, I think is great and fascinating, and I love watching those types of shows. So that's why MythBusters for me, and the chemistry between Adam and Jamie, even though of
Mhm.
course it later came out that they weren't really that friendly.
Oh.
They were more kind of like work colleagues.
Mhm.
They didn't hang out after work, or they weren't like buddy buddy or anything like that. They were just two guys who got hired on to do this show, and they didn't hate each other. It wasn't like it was a big feud or anything like that, but they weren't best friends
Yeah.
like you might think that they would be. But even still, they had this great chemistry between the two of them, with Adam being this sort of like very like jocular and outgoing guy, and Jamie being more the serious and kind of let's just kind of stick to doing what we're supposed to be doing guy. And that chemistry worked really well for the show. And so yeah, I just it's the type of show I can show to my kids. My kids really got into Mythbusters a while ago. And there are certain episodes that I still think about, and I'm just like, oh, that was a really great episode. Love to go back and rewatch that one.
That's an interesting thing you all bring up. I guess Great British Bake Off notwithstanding, or with withstanding, you haven't mentioned any sequential television. Like, if you watch Cheers, out of comfort, you know,
Hmm.
you you m- the narratives of sitcoms are meant to often have a cliffhanger at the end, or to leave you. They put the main character in a place where they don't get what they want, but they get what they need, which can be something opposite of what they want.
Right.
So you don't get that much anxiety from these shows that you're talking about, because they don't have that much. They're not out of sequence. You can watch any given episode and not worry about it. You don't have to see it in certain order or anything like
I
that.
For
have
sure.
yeah, I have
Mm.
one on my list that's more kind of sequential
Oh,
and week
okay.
to week.
We have a
Another one
cliffhanger.
which is in the dramedy department, but at least I
Okay.
think for the most part, a lot of the episodes they can easily be viewed standalone. So continue.
Wow. We have our whole halftime to guess what that is.
Ah.
What will Richard mention? um, Please download, rate, and review past episodes and suggest future episodes. You can be involved with the linear timeline of the Mount Rushmore podcast in that way. And we have had past suggestors be participants on the show. So it could be you. You don't have to be, but you could be. And then, give the gift of Mount Rushmore. If you have a person who loves podcasts, you think they would love Mount Rushmore, suggest it to them, post it online, do us a solid. And we're going to still have the cliffhanger hanging off the cliff, because we come back from break, and now Michael is going to tell us his third.
My third choice is um, just about any Ken Burns documentary.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
they're not
Okay.
all comfortable to watch, but they're so fascinating and long-winded, and can be broken up over the course
Mm-hmm.
of many days, many weeks, many months, that if we just need something to put on that might be a little a lot of the stuff of my choices are calming in a certain sense, because they just make you feel better about like the horrible world outside. But we have been watching on Canopy, which is like a free kind of
Oh, yeah.
library service
Yeah.
where you can get like 9 kid stuff. You can watch whatever you want, but like you can watch like 9 movies over the course of a month, right? So we've been watching the National Parks America's Best Ideas, which is a 2009 documentary, which is 6 episodes, and each episode is like, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. So we can like crank through, we'll have like a late dinner and just watch a little bit of that, and then not have to 100% pay attention to it. And it's just slow moving and
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, and uh, it just gets you like, it's very comforting, and you learn something, and you experience a way of life that doesn't exist anymore. And at least with the national parks one, you see like all this beautiful outdoor imagery. Maybe that again ties into like this kind of COVID thing that we're kind of on the tail end of, but could resurge at any time. But all of his stuff is like written and delivered in a style that is just so welcoming. Like, I think of like one of my favorite things I've ever watched is like his baseball documentary, which is, 9 episodes, or they have a 10th, which is like extra innings. And each of those is, 2 hours plus. And they just go through the history of the game, but told in this romanticism, but with a lot of truth to it at times, because it is a documentary. And um, I don't know. I think I think there's a Ken Burns effect on things, and I think that he is just very good at evoking the past and covering the past and just talking about everything. That's just like, I can watch anything he does, and I think it would be um, pretty interesting. Let's see.
You, sh-
I'm looking at
you
I'm
should.
looking at a list of things. I mean, listen, I'm not saying I want to watch like the Holocaust one, but like I'm all in on like Prohibition. Man,
Yeah.
that's gonna be fucking great. Jazz, would love to see that one. Thomas Jefferson. Like, I go down the list, and it's like, this is like a, because he covers mostly American history, but
Mhm.
he's good. He's good. Love
You
it.
think?
You should have had some. You should have written this out, your pick, as a letter, and then
Yeah.
had someone like Liev Schreiber like read
Yeah.
it, or Gary Sinise.
That is
I'll,
that's
I'll,
that's the other great thing about like his documentaries. It's like, just randomly you start hearing like Tom Hanks is narrating something. They're like, they got Hanks.
mhm.
Or you hear who's that guy with the gigantic head? Um,
Me?
Richard Manfredi narrating
Yeah.
one. No, he was on the Third Rock from the Sun, and he often plays a villain in some stuff.
Oh,
David Hyde
John
Pierce?
Lithgow.
John Lithgow.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Boy,
Third
you hear
Rock.
Lithgow coming in, and it just feels so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I do imagine Ken Burns has a team, his development team, and they're just looking for the
Mm.
most hangdog subject that there is, like old leather shoes. The 8-part documentary from Ken Burns.
Mm.
Diphtheria
Diphtheria.
documentary.
Rusty lawnmowers. The Ken Burns special. Yeah. Yeah, I did like. I think the only one I watched Civil War, and I think I watched Jazz.
Mhm.
And with Jazz, it was like, I mean, there's an amazing art form, and it has evolved. So, you think of how rock has evolved in 50 years, or however long we've had rock, 70 years, how long we had rock and roll. Jazz does it every night. Like, there's a new type of jazz. So like every episode of Ken Burns, it was like the jazz. There was like a new guy
Mm.
who completely rewrote the history of jazz. And you had every person who knew him going, he did it all. It was like there's a new Superman of jazz in every episode. So I just got frustrated of having to rewrite my understanding of it for me. What's your third, Richard?
All right, so this is my more linear kind of story based show. It's
Oh.
the Good Place,
Oh,
Oh, okay. That's a very
which is something
newish one.
newish one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
not one from my childhood, but something my wife got me started on. Sarah started watching it a few
Mhm,
years ago as her binge watch, and I kind of flitted in and out watching it,
mhm.
and she has taken to it. I think it is her favorite. Between that and Schitt's Creek, those are her two comfort TV shows, and I appreciate and support both of them. There is something about The Good Place, though, that it's more than just like a sitcom. It's also a, a very philosophical type of show.
Mhm.
Right? It's a lot of it is
Yeah.
about the nature of being a good person, and what does that mean,
Mhm.
and when is it appropriate to lie to your friends about something, when is it appropriate to, all these different like philosophical questions. Michael Schur actually wrote a book about kind of a basic real layman's philosophy book based on a lot of the stuff that went on in The Good Place, and there's an
Oh,
audio
that's
book of it.
exciting.
There's an audio book of it with the different cast members reading different chapters,
Mhm.
and it's a lot of fun. Um, but yeah, not only is it an incredibly funny show and just an incredibly well written show, but I think you get to see characters grow organically throughout the course of the however long it was, 6 seasons that The Good Place was on. And at the end of the show, there's no, yes, there are villains during the that kind of come in and create obstacles for the main characters, but even, spoiler alert for a 10-year-old series, um,
It's 10 years old?
Holy
it's
shit.
something like that. Yeah, it's something. Well, when it first started, yeah, I think it's something like that.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
Spoiler alert. There's
spoiler alert. So when the end of the first season happens, and I won't reveal it, when the big twist happens, um, the character that you think was a good guy turns out to be a bad guy. By the end, gets his redemption arc in the most
Mhm.
organic and just wonderful way possible. And you realize that the story is as much about him as it is about anybody
Oh,
else on the show. So it's just
is it
heartwarming.
Hawkeye? Hawkeye or
Yeah, it was Trapper John. So they had to
sorry.
write him out. So
Wow, cool. That's a good suggestion. I got it because I don't know. It felt pretty light to me. It felt like lightweight. I don't know.
how many
So I
episodes?
never.
How many episodes did you watch? Did you
I
watch
think
like
I
a
watched
season of it?
three. No, I think I watched less. I think I watched. You know what? You know what? I sit never. Whenever Ted Danson's on TV, I go. He gets another shot at being on TV. How does he get so many? He's like the cat. You know, he's got but more lives. He's had
Mr.
100.
Television. He's Mr. Television.
Yeah, I guess him and Tom Selleck just clock into television every year with a new show.
I do want to do, and we should write this down. I may have even suggested this, the Mount Rushmore of TV actors, like seriously only TV.
Yeah,
Just actors and actresses who you just know from television, aren't movie actors. Maybe they've been in some movies, but are just
yeah,
guys and gals who are just TV actors. And Ted Danson is like right at the top of that list.
yeah.
Don't you discount Tom Selleck as an actor
Sorry.
in Quigley Down Under. I swear to God, if you
Oh,
even do that one time,
I thought you were going to go Mr. Baseball, but I'll accept
Mr.
it.
Baseball is a great movie. So honestly, Quigley Down Under, pretty fucking good. Alan Rickman is great. He's got a great villain performance in that, as he would in every picture that Alan Rickman is in.
Okay, all right. We'll have
Now we've
we'll
gotten
have
to Quigley Down Under talk.
yeah. Let's do a Mount Rushmore of movies you watched on cold medicine
Mhm.
and believed them to be better than they were. Okay, what's your final one,
My final one shouldn't
Michael?
be too much of a surprise, but The Simpsons. And I
Oh
will
yeah,
say this about The Simpsons. I have been delighting in that just about every episode, maybe missing like the Michael Jackson episode, is on Disney Plus. I
yeah.
love rewatching the show that was so formative from my kind of teen years from, came out in 1991. And just, it was the thing that I watched so constantly that I know so well, that is so, every line is just like, sewn into my DNA. I don't think that's how
Mhm.
it works, but I think that's how it works. Except I don't have memories of like these little bits that were like chiseled off for
TV.
uh, TV for what's it called when it goes into syndication.
Oh yeah.
So much of my memory of The Simpsons is watching it when it was on at 7 o'clock after dinner, and then 7:30, plus on the new ones that would come on Thursdays or Sundays. And sometimes it would be on some other point in the day, and invariably I'd end up seeing Bart gets an elephant 20 or 30 times
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
life over the course of 10 years or however much it was. And they're just jokes that I just hadn't seen. I have no memory of. So I'm watching the show that has this total complete comfort that I know the lines. It's like singing your favorite song. And then all of a sudden there's like 5 extra seconds of a joke that I hadn't ever seen before.
Oh yeah.
What is going on? It's like watching a brand new show, and it happens on most. I'm like currently on like my rewatch uh that I'm just kind of picking away at, and Disney Plus says pick up where you left off, and it's like, yes, I don't need to think about it. It's like season 4 episode 9, here we
Hmm.
go. And then I can just get into it, watch something for 22 minutes and be like, I that is really funny. I can't believe they cut that out. I haven't seen that. That is so great. This is such a great little addition. It's like a little extended, like watching an extended edition of like your favorite Lord of the Rings or
Uh-huh.
Marvel thing or whatever. It's just like, oh my goodness, I'm so happy to experience this. I can't wait till somehow Futurama gets on there too, and
Mhm.
I experience the same thing.
That would be funny to
Although
do.
I would say this for Futurama, I had the DVDs of that, so
Oh.
whenever I've rewatched it was mostly via DVD, so I can discount that. But what were you going to say, Jeff?
Oh, if you were watching Star Wars, help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope. No, really. I need you. You're my only hope. Like, wait, where'd that line come from? Wait, that
Seriously, my
second part.
dude.
Seriously, my dude. Can you hook a sister up? What? Okay, well that's yeah. God, I gotta revisit. I literally have missed decades of that show, and I have to
That's the other
catch up.
thing is
Yeah.
like eventually there's a show that I probably stopped watching
Hmm.
right around 1999, I would say.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of faded into the past. It wasn't as funny as it was, even though
Hmm.
that's only still in the first third of how long this show has been out. So I've missed 400, 500 episodes of whatever is out there for this show. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, who knows if I'll ever get to it, but at least the resources there, and at least there would be like con- a continuancy of
Hmm.
something that is, I don't know.
Yeah. I fear for what will happen. Like if
Mm.
I can think that might be the only show where there's a fan campaign to cancel it. Because it just if Fox announced they were going to cancel it, the fans would keep it alive. So yeah, I don't think there's any way it's gonna disappear. Oh, Richard, your last one is what?
It's the Yule log from No. Although I did think about that would be the perfect choice. There's
Yeah.
nothing more comforting than turning on the Yule log channel over Christmas. No, my last choice is The West Wing,
Oh wow. Okay.
which just one of those
Good show.
shows that my father-in-law who lives with us rewatched it several years ago, which is very strange since he's a hardcore Trumper. And I
Hmm.
just kept thinking, what are you getting out of this?
Yeah.
Like, is the message of the show not quite getting through to you, or
Yeah.
how are you watching this? I
Like he's
just
watching
seems
the Little Rascals, a bunch of incompetent kids trying to do something that he knows they'll never accomplish,
yeah,
called
exactly.
democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was for me to watch it because I started watching it with him because I think I was between jobs at the time, so I think I'd had one of those situations where I had nothing better to do than to sit around and watch the West Wing.
Mhm.
And it's the type of show, especially in the early seasons, before it started getting a little too preachy. But it starts to you just feel like this is what democracy is supposed to be like. This is what we want. This is what we think that politicians and people in the political world are supposed to be. Even
Yeah.
though intellectually we know that's not true and it's a dirty business and
Hmm.
people don't have your best interests at heart, they have their best interests at heart. Um, as a bleeding heart liberal, that's what you want to think that other liberals have in their hearts. And that's not always the case, and you know that. But this show made you feel like, well, maybe somebody out there is like this. Maybe there's a Sam Seaborn in
Hmm.
real life. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody who was doing what's right for a country, not for a party, and not for
Not for
not.
their own personal
Yeah.
gain. And
Yeah.
again, it's one of those shows where yes, there are like season long storylines, but for the most part, you can jump in a lot of the episodes. You can jump into one episode.
Hmm.
There are a lot of standalone episodes. I mean, if you aren't charmed by the episode where President Bartlett is calling into the Butterball Turkey Hotline, I don't know what to tell you about television. It's
Hmm.
not for. I don't think television's for you at that point.
Hmm. Yeah, it does seem also one of the last important shows. Like there's been a lot of I'm trying to think of what's and one of the last shows I think to deal with that like Veep was kind of I guess a sarcastic look at politics and
Yeah,
West Wing was almost kind of Capra esque in that you were trying to still preserve this
Hmm.
this America that was
yeah.
really
There's a sweep of epicness to it,
yeah.
to the West Wing, which you
Hmm.
just don't get very much in television anymore. I mean, nowadays every prestige show is trying to be gritty
Yeah.
and down and dirty and show you what it's really like. And The West Wing is the
Mhm.
opposite of that. It was a prestige show that was trying to be Capra-esque and kind of epic in nature
Yeah.
and kind of, yes, it was painting with broad strokes, but that kind of was part of the purpose.
Mhm.
There's no right wing version of the show that would work. Like it would be
No.
like if you were to try to capture the vitriol and the pain is the purpose sort of aspect of so many things that are done. Like it's just like assholes high-fiving over like pushing like an old lady into like a mud
Yeah.
puddle for 51 minutes. Like as make believe as make believe as the West Wing was at times, where like someone would sweep in and like the John Goodman Speaker of the House
Mhm.
character when he had to take over as president for an episode and a half when the other president was shot and or something happened, and it was something like all of the things lining up for the worst possible thing, and then the Republican Speaker of the House comes in, and like at the end he's just like, just doing my duty for the country. It's like, what? These awful people would do all the worst things if they had like 10 minutes alone in the Oval
The
Office.
Oval Office.
And like even like spoiler alert for sure that is 20 years old at this point or whatever, but like even like the Republican that was like going against whoever the successor was, even he
Jimmy,
was like
Jimmy
uh,
Smith. I mean, it was Alan Alda, for God's sakes,
yeah,
one of television's most beloved
Mhm.
yeah, it was
actors.
Alan
There's no way he was
Alda
going to be an
as like
asshole.
yeah, so like there is uh I love the show too. I listened to like the entire like West Wing uh recap kind of podcast show with Josh Molina and Rishikesh Hirway. I enjoyed that. As in like kind of back and forth, kind of would watch an episode and listen to the podcast and watch
Mm.
an episode. And like, that stuff is so fun. So good choice, Richard, because there are so many aspects of how you can retell these things now, especially if you get like a podcast sort of involved in it that kind of is a companion piece
Mhm.
to your enjoyment, where you can watch something and learn something separately and whatever. Love stuff like that.
Yeah. Fun choices, gents. So, you know what? I don't know that I have comfort television. It's
Mm-mm.
funny. I don't
Yeah.
know. We don't. I
Jeff takes a huge cartoon mallet and just conks himself on the head at the end of a workday, at the end of the night. Just like, wake me up when it's all over.
um. So let's go because I'd never heard it before, and I appreciate you rocking my world with it. Ground Force Gardening Show.
Very
It's a
nice.
fun, yeah, fun new
You guys
thing
would
to.
love it. You guys would
Oh, I love
love
it.
it.
I love it. Yeah, it's a
And
great
if you
show.
want if you want another one, an old British kind of competition show, check out Scrap Heap Challenge,
Oh wow.
which was like hosted by one of the guys from Red Dwarf, Robert Llewellyn, which is like a bunch of teams are like working in a junkyard to try to build something to accomplish some task. And it's very British. And I think they had an American version of it, which was less charming.
Yeah, that was
But
Junkyard Wars.
yeah, there's
Was the
the
American
The
version of it. Yeah,
British version of it is, obviously the
superior.
driving wheel's on the wrong side of the car, but it's basically the same.
Right.
uh, let's see. Yeah, and I don't know. So okay, how about The Good Place? Because you're opening my eyes to something I really need to do, and I'm going to watch it through that lens of kind of it as almost a primer to philosophy or whatever. And then Ken Burns, because nobody tries harder than that guy to bore me. Uh, and why don't we go?
Even his haircut is boring
Oh,
yet
for sure.
comforting.
That's right. I left the. He's got George Harrison's hair somehow. He found it. Yeah. And oh yeah, Davy Jones. Okay, and why don't we also go with The Simpsons? Because come on, it's The Simpsons. It's yeah. All right, and Diamond Joe Quimby will come shoot me if I don't mention it. This has been the Mount Rushmore of Comfort TV. I'm always Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.